Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production. Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Today's guest is Liz Drewiske. And today's episode, how one nurse went from Navy Corpsman to an entrepreneurial tech wizard. Tired of feeling trapped in a job that no longer fulfills you? Is your nursing job no longer the fun-filled adventure you imagined? Find your passion again through nurse entrepreneurship. Step out into the light and come feel the sun. Join the Nurse Shark Academy today at thenurssharkacademy.biz and come feel the sun. Hello and welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. My name is Tina Baxter and I'm your host. My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining confidence, skills, and freedom to live your life on your own terms. You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Join us and support these wonderful nurse entrepreneurs and leaders. Today's guest is Liz Drewiske, and she has a business, NavPath, a subsidiary of D2 Consultants in Montana. So welcome to the show, Liz.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. Now, can you tell me a little bit about your background? And our first question is, how did you become a nurse?
Yeah, so I became a nurse a little bit off the beaten path, I would say. I went into the military shortly after I graduated from high school, and I was a Navy Corpsman with the Marines. And so I spent my time learning combat medicine, knowing that I wanted to be in the medical field in some capacity. And when I was deployed to Iraq on my deployment, I worked with a lot of doctors who recommended nursing over medical school. So I took their advice and came back from my deployment, and that's what I did. I went to nursing school.
Okay, that's great. So where did you go to school?
I went to Boise State University in Idaho.
Okay. Are you from Idaho originally?
I am. Yeah, I'm from a very small town in Idaho. But, when I went to college, Boise State Broncos were crushing it in the football world. And so I'd always wanted to go there anyways, and it just felt like the right time.
Okay. So you ended up getting your bachelor's degree in nursing?
That's right. I got my bachelor's degree in nursing at Boise State, and I met my husband there as well. So my husband is a nurse as well.
Oh, right. So twofer, right?
That's right.
So tell me what your first job was as a RN.
Yeah, so coming out of nursing school, I knew that I wanted to be a NICU nurse, but that was a field that was really difficult to get into straight away. And because I had experience in trauma and combat nursing, or healthcare, I guess I should say, as a corpsman, I was accepted for a role in the emergency department in a rural community outside of Boise. So I worked there for a year, and that was plenty for me. I give high praise to emergency room nurses because that is tough work.
I have not been an ER nurse, but I have been the nurse. My background is psych. So I'm the nurse that they would call when they couldn't handle what was happening psychiatrically with someone.
Yes. So much need for that, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what was it like being in the military? And I know there's certain things you probably can't talk about, but I want some of our listeners to know what it's like to serve in that capacity, especially in the field in combat medicine.
Yeah. So the military was not my original plan. I went to college for a year, and when I was doing summer school, had a friend who had joined, and I thought, well, I could do that. And that's kind of what gets me into all of my interesting positions in my life is I can do that. So I did. I applied to be in the Navy, went and did all my testing. And although they were not excited about me signing up as a corpsman, because I could have done jobs that would have paid bonuses, I knew in my heart that medical care was where I needed to be. I didn't know exactly where, but I knew that my heart was in medicine. So I went to my boot camp training like everybody does. And then I went to a follow-on school to be with the Marines. The Marines are a department of the Navy, technically. And so they do not have their own medical detachments. They borrow, if you will, from the Navy.
Yes.
And so the Navy corpsmen will often train, do some additional training to be with the Marines, and that's what we call being a greenside corpsman. And so I spent my entire time with the Marines. I wore their uniform. I was, located on Marine Corps bases, and then I ended up deploying in a Marine Corps detachment. And I will say that it was interesting because I got to do things in the military that I've never gotten to do since and will never get to do again. You really were you were allowed to do essentially whatever the providers were comfortable with letting you do. And so in a deployment zone, especially, they feel very comfortable once they get to know you, letting you do a lot more. And so, that's how I ended up in deployment. And then while I was there, I was in a shock trauma platoon. I had advanced pretty quickly in rank. I was an E5 by the time I went to Iraq. And so that was about 2.5 years after I had joined the military. And whoever thought it was a great idea for a 23-year-old to be in charge of 23 people, we did it. And I was too naive and dumb to realize how crazy it was. But I look back now and think, wow, that was a lot of responsibility.
Well, I have to say, first of all, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
But they expect a lot, not just the military, but just in medical in general. We have a bad habit of throwing people out there before they're ready. And this is from a nurse that was just out of nursing school, fresh off of orientation. My first night, I was in orientation on second shift, and I was charge nurse on third shift.
Yes. And
Yeah.
again, you look back and think, wow.
Yes.
Now that I know what I know, I can't figure out why that was a good idea.
Yeah, my boss said, "Yeah, just call me. I'll come help you." She didn't answer her phone. I had three admissions, no unit secretary, and a CNA that could barely walk because her knees were so bad. And I was on the detox unit with three heavily detoxing patients by
Oh,
myself.
wow.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
trial by fire, as I call it, is not ideal. But I think that we are finding ourselves in that position again in healthcare right now, where
Yes.
new graduates are coming out of school and uh, they're finding themselves in similar positions where you figure it out. You take what you've learned and you problem solve.
Yep. Yep. I think I feel for some of the nurses that are coming out of school right now because especially ones that were trained during the pandemic because if you had finished your schooling right before the pandemic hit or were almost done, then you came out with a better appreciation and they just and here in Indiana they would basically say you could work as a graduate nurse and you don't have to take the NCLEX, we're just going to work you. And so they had this great experience, but they were kind of swallowed up by the hospitals, and so they had a lot of hands on. But it's the ones that were right behind them that because of the pandemic they didn't get all that hands on, and so when they graduated it was kind of like sink or swim. Sink or swim.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah, it was during that time. I was in graduate school actually during all of that time in our nursing history. And
Are you there? And we're back with Liz. And as you were saying,
yeah, so I think during the pandemic, while I was in my graduate school for nursing education, I had this epiphany that I wasn't built to be in academia because I just felt for all of those professors, the instructors, the students trying to get by and just kind of trying to, like you said, sink or swim and hoping that they could swim. And I realized in that moment that academia was not the place for me. And so I stepped away from it. For the first time in my life, I quit something.
okay. You know what? And I don't think of it as quitting. I think of it more as a pivot.
That's right. That's right.
And
Yeah,
we did a lot of that during the pandemic.
you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it not only because of my understanding with myself that academia was not correct for me, but also because I was a mom working as a nurse during the pandemic, and a lot of concessions had to be made for all of us.
Okay, looks like we're still recording. I apologize for those of you that are watching us on that will be watching us on YouTube and listening to this. We're having technical issues. There's an issue with Google, so my internet has been going in and out for some reason. So I just wanted to apologize and let our listeners know that it is not Liz's fault. It is something going on with our show. So now we've taken off the background, and that seems to make it work better. So
Okay, excellent. I love it. Yeah. So yeah, I think we're just talking about the fact that, we have made concessions over the past few years. And we're seeing that now in the entrepreneurial world of nursing as well, where some of us have decided to change healthcare for the better, but in a different way.
I think so. I'm seeing that it's the pandemic has shown a light on some of the cracks that we've had in healthcare.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, right now, they're becoming chasms. But I think there's a bit of hope that these things will change, and that we're able to, help the nurses and all the rest of the staff and prevent the burnout that everybody's been talking about. And I just had a conversation with a colleague, and she's really beginning to feel the burnout. And I think for us, because we were in, we still worked in psychiatry. We were still working throughout the pandemic as well, but we got to work virtually. And I think just coming back from all of that and then going back into the office and all the stress of that and the stresses of the changes in the job and healthcare, I think it's just kind of finally catching up with us in those areas that we weren't front lines, meaning that we weren't there with the ventilators and all of that. But it's kind of like the compassion fatigue because we've had to deal with everybody else's stuff
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
midst of all this.
That's exactly right. I left the bedside inpatient nursing shortly before the pandemic. I was in NICU nursing, high acuity, and hearing those stories from my friends who were working in high acuity NICU, and then those who were still working critical care and intensive care, um, they were experiencing obviously intense nursing,
Mhm.
as we all saw. But I think there were some of those, or some of us out there who were not at the front lines. We weren't we weren't in the thick of it, but we were still experiencing the hardships that went along with it, just in a different way. And it tended to be in that emotional compassion fatigue sense rather than the boots on the ground heavy lifting.
Yeah. I think people forget that those of us that maybe weren't in long term care, because they also had to suffer through a lot too.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but those of us that were on the outpatient side, we had to deal with the uncertainty because we had patients that didn't want to come into the office who needed to be. I had a patient that actually died from gallbladder disease because he just would not go get checked out. He just refused to have surgery because he was afraid of COVID and he wouldn't go to the hospital. And he thought he might have had cancer because they didn't know what it was, and his mental illness played a part in it. But he just decided if it was his time to go, he was just going to go because he was too afraid to go to the hospital. And dealing with that type of stuff for several years, and then now coming out of it, and then you've got all these other stuff with the pandemic. I mean, with the political system and inflation and possible recession, all those pressures. I think as a country, we've been really dealing with a lot of that and reeling from it. And so I think we're going to have a second wave of the burnout and the fatigue that's going to be coming in because of it, because we're still not all the way there. It's sort of like every time we turn around, there's some other boogeyman on the horizon,
I like
unfortunately.
that. I like that. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because as I've said a lot lately to just colleagues and peers, that we aren't experiencing a nurse. There's not a shortage of nurses. We keep hearing about the nurse shortage, and I think that it's important for us to remember that it's not a nursing shortage. It's a
Mhm.
shortage of nurses who are working in the healthcare system right now, and there's a big difference.
Yes, it's a big misnomer.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I think we have a shortage of nurses that are willing to put up with the BS, basically.
That's exactly what I've actually said. I'm afraid to swear on your show though, because I am a sailor, you guys.
Well, I had one other guest, and I just marked the show explicit when that happens.
Sometimes it just happens, right?
And sometimes it just happens, and it's kind of funny when it does sometimes. So, how did you then transition from working, um, in OB as a NICU nurse to doing what you're doing now? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a convoluted story. So I try to make it as streamlined as possible. But we moved to Montana after shortly before the pandemic, actually. I was expecting my third child, and we have family here. So it was the place for us to be. But high acuity NICU does not exist where we are. So I identified a way to still take care of high risk babies without taking care of high risk babies. And that was with high risk maternity care. So maternal fetal medicine became my passion, and just identifying where that upstream chasm was. As you mentioned, there are these chasms, and where the gap was between finding out that somebody has a high risk baby or potentially has a high risk pregnancy, and then what happens between that point and when they deliver. And in that gap, I created a new role with the assistance of a very incredible nurse manager who is very supportive, and kind of just gave me free reign to say, you know what, I trust you and I trust your gut, and I trust that you're going to help us fix this gap. And that's where I learned about nurse navigation. And, it primarily exists or did exist at that time in the oncology space. But
Hmm.
the more I learned about it, the more I realized that it belonged everywhere, not just in oncology. And so we were able to apply it within the obstetric space, high risk maternity, GYN care with our surgical patients, and then in the breast oncology space as well, because we had a specialist there. And it was wildly successful in all of those spaces. But speaking of the compassion fatigue and everything that had gone along with the years previous, I was offered a job in a software company, of all things, and stepped away from the bedside for a couple of years. And in working for that software company, I learned operations and really advanced on my leadership experiences. And leaving that role, I realized that it was time for me to start my own business.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And so tell me about your current business and what you're doing with NavPath.
Yeah, so NavPath is an organization that specializes in nurse navigation. Nurse navigation is a practice of patient care where the nurses they manage the complexities of patient care by providing them with support for their socioeconomic needs, their SDOH needs, scheduling, and the nuances of each complex patient experience. Because we know that 6 in 10 Americans have some form of a chronic health condition, but 4 of 10 have multiple. The fun thing is that it's going to be like a guessing game for the people watching. Like, which background's going to be up next?
Yes. Yes. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's because you heard of what happened with the pharmaceutical industry and the Trojan that got in there and they're having trouble fixing getting meds out there and all this stuff. So now there's a big investigation and all that stuff. So I'm like, is there some sort of sabotage going on? What's happening?
It does keep saying that Chrome is having problems. So
Yes. Okay. So you're in Chrome too. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's part of the issue. So yeah, it's Chrome. It's having the problem. We're not having the problem. It's Chrome. It's Google.
it's
Fix it.
true. But here we are. We're pivoting as we've been talking about, picking up where we left off.
That's right. Okay. So you were talking about NavPath.
Yeah, so really the ultimate plan is, or the ultimate goal is to help patients navigate the complexities of the healthcare system, um, which is a difficult system to navigate right now. Fractured healthcare is a known challenge, a known, I'm going to say the word problem. Nobody wants to say the word problem these days, but it is, it's a problem. And, you add to that the massive numbers of nurses who are leaving the healthcare system. And not just nurses, there's providers, there's pharmacists who are saying, it doesn't feel safe right now. And so I have to step away. And I don't want that to be discouraging for new nurses coming into the field, because I can only imagine being 3/4 of the way through nursing school and hearing about the world of healthcare and being concerned that you had made the wrong choice, right? Um, but I hope that they can find peace in the fact that we're out here, and I say there's a revolution happening where nurse entrepreneurs are coming together.
Yeah.
We're not at odds with one another. We are coming together and really trying to say, you know what? Your idea, the way that you are attacking this is brilliant, and I want to support you any way that I can. And we're moving forward.
I think it's so important. I'm so encouraged by what I'm seeing happening with nursing, particularly on LinkedIn. I don't know if you ever follow, but follow the hashtag nurses on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
there's so much going on. There's a group that's working on the reimbursement issue for nursing and carving out that, and that's not a new concept. That's an old concept, but it's getting renewed. There's actually a call for us to revamp our nursing diagnoses again and pull out Nanda, Nick, and Knock. There's
Oh,
another call for that. I'm like, I wasn't aware Nanda, Nick, Knock went away because I've been away from academia for so long.
yeah.
And so I think there's such a great opportunity for nurses right now to come up with solutions to the problems that we have in healthcare,
Yeah.
and to find that next Florence Nightingale. You
I
know,
love it. I love it.
yeah. I'm excited about this. And so, how do you? So, if you do you work with the patients themselves? Do you work with doctors' offices? How would they get a hold of you if they're interested in your services?
Yeah, so the basic premise behind it is that NavPath, I have a website, navpath.me, and I also am very active on LinkedIn. NavPath is a program that will be, that is purchased, if you will, by healthcare organizations. The current focus is on ambulatory care simply because it's what I know. But we also have a stronghold of interest, if you will, in senior living as well and in long-term care, just knowing that they also could benefit from that in between, that champion for the patients. But the idea really is, let's teach the nurses uh, how to be autonomous but supported in their autonomy. We have to provide our nurses with the policies and the protocols to back them up if we're going to give them autonomy, because otherwise they work in fear, and working in fear is never going to lead to success. And so there's that piece of the puzzle, but really there's five steps of the NavPath journey, and that is change management, project management, because if you don't have a change management plan or a project management plan, then you're kind of doomed from the beginning. The fiscal feasibility of the process. So helping organizations to identify billing codes to be able to bill for the nurses' services and to identify metrics and ROI for using the services of a nurse navigator model. And then building the leadership, emotional intelligence, and autonomy skills that are required to be successful. And I think that's again where we miss the mark, is putting people into elevated positions without providing them with the tools to be successful. And so that's our mission, is to empower healthcare organizations to implement the nurse navigation model of care, to allow nurses to step up into leadership positions and take some of the responsibility and the administrative burden off of the doctors and then the support staff of nurses as well.
I think that's so important. And I know some administrators quake in fear when you hear the word nursing and autonomy.
True.
And I say that as a nurse practitioner who, you know, we're still in Indiana. We still have a collaborative practice agreement. And every time we make the argument, we're not expanding our scope, we're staying within our scope of practice. It's this antiquated notion that you have to have some physician to sign off on your charts after the fact, never actually see the patient, but you pay them all this money just to sign a piece of paper, basically.
Yeah.
And we collaborate naturally. I mean, if I have a problem, I call up a whole bunch of folks. I'm like, hey, I've got this problem. What did you guys do? You should see us at our office. It was the email threads. We're like, anybody ever prescribed this medicine? What does it do? Have you have experience with it? So we collaborate naturally. And I think any, nurses used to be autonomous. And I think people forget that. But historically, nurses were autonomous. And yes, nurses prescribe medication historically.
Yeah.
Many people don't understand that. And so we've changed to having these medical silos, and I don't think it works for anyone to do that. We need
Okay.
to learn how to work better together collaboratively. I mean, yes, what the physicians do is very important and they bring in a level of expertise. But that doesn't mean that because their level of expertise is different, that it is even more value than what the expertise of the nurse would bring. Because I guarantee you, you can do the surgery, but if you leave them there by themselves, they're going to die.
That's true.
The surgeon does the cutting, but the nurse keeps you alive, right? Because
It's
if
true.
you're not watching what's happening, you're going to go south.
It's true. It's interesting because I think something that I've come across many times is a concern over the use of nurse-led care, nurse-led patient care and outcomes. And I think it's important to specify that nurse-led does not mean nurse-owned. There's a big difference, right? So allowing the nurse to have the autonomy to know what their guardrails are and what their boundaries are because they are protected by documents is a lot different than saying you can go do what you need to do and I trust you. There's a really big difference. And something that I hear a lot is, I want to protect my license. Completely understandable. Everybody should want to protect their license and,
Absolutely.
not be a cowboy, as one might say. Um, but a lot of people don't know what their scope is, right? We talk about the nursing scope and not working outside of our scope, but a lot of people don't know what that actually means. And so, nurses are capable of a lot more than what we do. And some of that's out of fear, not only by the nurses, but also by the providers who think, I don't want to push them to do more than they can or than they should. And so, if you really look up through the American Nursing Association, it's really, monitoring, evaluating, um, eh, procedures. Oh gosh, there's a whole list of things. But ultimately, you can do procedures, you can take part in a screening and things of that nature as long as there is documentation to back it up.
Precisely.
And so an example I might give is when we were implementing the nurse navigation role in the obstetric world, um, we were trying to identify the best way to receive that fiscal feasibility. You have to be mindful of the bottom line. Nobody likes to talk about it, but
Yes.
ultimately, if the healthcare organization can't make money, then it will fail to exist. And so, by creating an opportunity for us nurses, there were two of us, to listen to Doppler heart tones on patients at 32 weeks, which is a sweet spot in pregnancy for the most part. Patients who are high risk have already been receiving regular ultrasounds through maternal fetal medicine. We would collect or connect them to non-stress tests, monitoring if we needed to, which nurses are in fact allowed to monitor.
Hmm.
And then for the lower risk patients, we would just do Doppler heart tones. And if anything came up that was of concern, we had very clear parameters in our protocol that allowed us to reach out to a provider. But as long as everything fell within the parameters, we were allowed to do our educational session and listen to Doppler heart tones and allow the patient to be on their way. This was not a replacement visit. Nobody was trying to replace a doctor's care, but our goal was to supplement the care that they were receiving from their providers. And we found that to be overwhelmingly the case.
Well, if you would think about it, that only would make sense that you would have that collaborative piece where, yes, the provider is writing the prescriptions and managing the care and the day to day, this is what we should see happen. But that interim time, that piece where things can go wrong, wouldn't you not want someone to kind of be monitoring the situation and say, hey, we have a potential problem here so we can avert it from becoming a crisis? I
That's right.
think if we look at it that way, one, it would make it to where others would understand it. And I think that should be the standard of care, right? That you have those extra eyes and ears. And I think being a nurse navigator would probably be one of the most important things because I don't know about you, but having my husband had a kidney transplant, and I thank the Lord for his nurse navigators because I didn't have the time to track down this or that. They were very good about finding out what medication he needed, how much he needed, communicating with us, letting us know what the clinic schedule was going to be, making sure that all his appointments were set up and needs were met, and keeping me in the loop. And it was such a great experience with this particular hospital. We had previously been with another hospital, and that experience was a complete disaster. They never communicated with us. We never knew what we were going to do. We didn't know what the next steps were. So having someone help you to get through that complex healthcare system is golden. I don't understand why we don't implement this more. I think every specialty needs a nurse navigator. I love my community health workers in my clinic because they help us with things like, oh, you're not coming to your appointment, you have transportation issues, you don't have food in your house, can we give you resources to help you do, get those things, because you're not going to care about your mental health if you're not eating, right? So I think those things are so important. So with your current business, you're all up and ready to go. You've got your website now. So I want to make sure that people hear that you go to NavPath, that's NavPath.me for her website, and you're working with healthcare corporations. So if any of you leaders are out there and you're looking for nurse navigators, please hit up Liz and her company because I think that's great. And what's it like in Montana? I want to know. But I've always wanted to go. I'm serious. I know it's one of the least populated states. I know all that.
Yeah.
But I just thought it would just look so pretty.
It is. It's funny because actually on LinkedIn today, I posted about healthcare in relation to, a metaphorical lake that's frozen over, because that's what we're living. It's cold for a long time here every year. We got close to a foot of snow 3 days ago, and it was like a snow globe outside, but today it was 50 degrees. So one never knows what you might get in Montana.
Very similar to Indiana, where we had almost 70 degrees 2 days ago, and then we woke up and it was in the 20s again.
Yes. So it's not just us.
No. We just our motto is just wait around, the weather change.
That's
Give it
right.
any minute.
That's right.
Yep. Well, okay. Well, this wraps up our segment. I want to thank you for being here today and letting us know a little bit more about what you do. And again, go to our website, navpath.me, and we'll. And I just, again, thank you. And I apologize for all the glitches. It was Google. It was not us. It was Google that's glitching. But I want to thank you all for tuning in to the Nurse Shark Academy show. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and then hit that notification bell on our YouTube channel so you get notified when our episodes come out. And then if you're following us on Podbean, we do also have a special affiliation with Podbean. So if you're looking to start your podcast, you can grab our affiliation link for that as well. And then if you're a nurse and you're a nurse business owner and you want to come on the show, just go ahead and reach out to us at the Nurse Shark Academy show, and we'll be happy to meet with you and talk. Thanks again, Liz, for being here with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Tina.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Nurses, are you ready for more? My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining confidence, skills, and the freedom to live your life on your own terms. Assisting you in achieving your goals through tailored advice, continuous learning, and a collaborative approach is at the heart of everything I do. Stop being eaten alive. Come feel the sun. Be a nurse shark. Thank you for listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the NurseSharkAcademy.biz.